It's 4 p.m. on Thursday, September 11th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. Now we begin this afternoon with the government's announcement on hiking the nation's cigarette prices. The measure comes as Korea's smoking rate is often blamed on the low price of cigarettes. Our Hwang Ji-hye has our top story.
Smokers in Korea will soon have to pay almost double what they currently do for a pack of cigarettes. The government announced Thursday that it will push through plans to raise the average price of a pack by 2,000 won to 4,500 won, or roughly $4.30 starting next year. It's the first price hike in 10 years. The aim is to cut the country's high smoking rate.
The smoking rate of Korean adult males stands at around 44%, which is the highest among OECD member nations. The rate of teenagers stands at over 20%.
Cigarette prices in Korea are currently among the cheapest in the world, standing at just around one-third the OECD average. The health ministry believes a price hike is the most effective means of dropping smoking rates. As proof, it cites the 13 percentage point drop at the end of 2004 when the government last raised cigarette prices. Its goal is to cut the male smoking rate to 29% in 2020. Other anti-smoking measures laid out by the government include mandatory warning images on cigarette packaging and banning retailers from posting any kind of cigarette advertisement. Before any changes take effect, they will have to be approved by the National Assembly. And with both the ruling and opposition parties raising concerns that the measures will burden smokers in low-income bracket, passage is far from a certainty right now. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Now, over at the National Assembly, lawmakers are still trying to work through their differences over a bill to investigate April's ferry accident, which killed more than 300 people. Pressure from the public to reach common ground is growing. Our Choi Yu-sun has our next report.
Korea's ruling and opposition parties return from the 5-day Chuseok holiday, having listened to the people in regards to the current political standoff over the contested bill to probe April's ferry disaster. But it seems they only listened to what they wanted to hear. With no sign of a compromise, the ruling side continues to urge the opposition to cooperate in swiftly passing a number of economic and reform-related bills.
Each standing committee must immediately deliberate on the bills that concern the people's livelihood. The parliament must immediately pass the non-controversial bills pending at the assembly.
Referring to public anger over the political paralysis, party leader Kim Moo-sung called on the ruling and opposition floor leaders to reach a deal on the bill by the weekend. He then urged the parliamentary speaker to exercise his authority to call a session next Monday to vote on other pending bills with or without the opposition. The opposition, for its part, continues to pressure the ruling side to return to talks about giving the ferry victims' families more of a say in the accident investigation.
If the ruling party wants to restore public trust, it should first show a forward-looking position on passing the livelihood-related bills, including the Seoul ferry bill.
While the parliamentary speaker has no plans to invoke his authority at the risk of further lengthening the impasse, he's been in contact with the two parties to seek a solution to the crisis. With both parties unable to stand further public criticism, it's thought the two floor leaders will meet as early as Thursday to try iron out their differences. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
In the meantime, President Park Geunhye will embark on a week-long trip that will take her to Canada and the United Nations next Saturday, that's September 20th. For the first time since taking office last year, President Park will address the UN General Assembly, where she is expected to lay out her plan to restore peace and stability in Northeast Asia. The president will also attend the UN Climate Summit in New York and outline Korea's plan to tackle climate change using the creative economy. In Canada, President Park will focus on bolstering economic ties on the heels of Seoul and Ottawa's recently signed free trade agreement. This is the first time in 15 years that a Korean leader is making a state visit to Ottawa and follows Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper's visit to Seoul earlier in March. U.S. President Barack Obama laid out his strategy on stamping out the growing threat of Islamic State militants in Syria and Iraq. Our Shin Se-min gives us the key points of Obama's address as well as Washington's plans to send more U.S. military personnel to the region.
Our objective is clear. We will degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL through a comprehensive and sustained counterterrorism strategy.
In a 15-minute televised speech, U.S. President Barack Obama laid out his plan to destroy the militant group that calls itself the Islamic State. His plan includes both military and diplomatic efforts. On the military front, Obama said an additional 475 U.S. troops would be sent to Iraq to support forces there. The U.S. president, however, also emphasized to the war-weary American public that those being dispatched were not combat troops. On the diplomatic front, Obama said he would be forming what he called a broad coalition of at least 40 nations to confront the militant threat by launching airstrikes on strategic targets and assisting the Iraqi government. Although President Obama said there was no indication that the Islamic State poses an imminent threat in the United States, he did not rule out the possibility of there being an attack on U.S. interests overseas. In his speech, Obama was unequivocal and strong in his language, in stark comparison to last month when he said that the U.S. didn't have a strategy for dealing with the militants.
We will hunt down terrorists who threaten our country wherever they are. That means I will not hesitate to take action against ISIL in Syria as well as Iraq. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven.
President Obama called on the U.S. Congress to back his moves and approve the release of resources to train and equip local forces for their fight. Ahead of the speech on Wednesday, President Obama spoke to Saudi Arabian King Abdullah by phone to garner support. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And while President Obama was speaking in Washington, America's top diplomat was in the Middle East, drumming up support for the U.S. plan to confront the Islamic State. Our Park Ji-won has more.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry visited Baghdad on Wednesday, a matter of days after Iraq's new Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi was sworn in. Meeting with the new Iraqi leader, Kerry vowed U.S. support for the new government's battle against Islamic State militants.
We're prepared to take, not only with respect to ISIL, which is critical, and your own military's commitment to reconstituting itself and to being prepared to take the fight to ISIL, but also your commitment to the broad reforms that are necessary in Iraq.
Kerry stressed that IS is a vicious terrorist organization, and the U.S. and many other countries will help counter the threat posed by the group.
There is literally no place for their barbarity in the modern world. This is a fight that the Iraqi people must win, but it's also a fight that the rest of the world needs to win with them. And it's a fight the United States and the rest of the world need to support every single step of the way.
As Kerry was meeting high-level officials Wednesday, 3 car bombs exploded in eastern Baghdad, killing about 17 people and injuring dozens of others. Meanwhile, Russia's state news agency RIA Novosti reported of a possible nuclear threat by the IS militants. The news agency quoted comments by Andrei Novikov, the head of the Commonwealth of Independent States Anti-Terrorism Center, that suggested IS might have a nuclear capability. He said the terror group declared its intent to use nuclear weapons in June, and about 40 kilograms of uranium compounds had been stolen by insurgents from Mosul University in Iraq in July. However, atomic experts at the UN do not consider it to be a major threat, stressing that it would take years for IS to develop nuclear weapons. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
With the sluggish economic recovery in mind, the government is boosting budget spending next year by nearly 6%. In a report to the ruling Saenuri Party today, Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan said the 2015 budget will be around $8 billion more than the initial plan. The increase far exceeds last year's bump of 4% and lies outside of the nation's goal average rate of 3.5%. Now, responding to concerns about the fiscal deficit, which is projected to be about 2% of Korea's GDP, Choi said it was at a manageable level compared to other advanced economies. The Finance Ministry will submit its final figures to Parliament by September 23rd. Now, it's been just over a month since the government eased regulations aimed at boosting Korea's housing market, but there's already growing concerns the move will place a bigger burden on the domestic economy. Our Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
Household debt rose sharply in August, raising concerns that it's spiraling out of control. Housing loans jumped more than $4.5 billion in August from the previous month to $518 billion. Household debt also increased by $5.2 billion last month, inching up again after it surpassed its all-time high of $1 trillion in June. The mounting debt is seen as a result of government measures that ease limits on the amount of money people can borrow from banks when buying a home. The move is part of the expansionary policies by the economic team led by Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan to induce spending and promote corporate activity. The expansionary policies were further fueled by the Bank of Korea when it cut its base rate by 0.25 percentage point last month, ending a 15-month freeze. Critics say the government's policies will actually increase household debt in the longer term and ultimately stifle domestic demand as they encourage households to rack up higher debts. Although the finance minister did not directly comment on whether the central bank should make further cuts to its base rate, Choi has reiterated the importance of coordinated fiscal and monetary policies to boost government efforts to spur economic recovery. To drive his point home, the ministry pointed to lackluster on-quarter growth of 0.6% in the second quarter. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
On the trade front, exports of handsets and semiconductors continued their upward trend last month, leading the way for Korea's information and communications technology products. The Trade Ministry says although the total ICT exports edged down 2% from the same month last year, outbound shipments totaled more than $14 billion in August, which the ministry says is still a significant gain, making for a $7.5 billion surplus. While outbound shipments of handsets and semiconductor display panels continued their growth streak for the third consecutive month, exports of digital televisions dropped. And staying with ICT, if you live in Korea, you've probably come across what's called the Tmoney card. Millions of people in Korea use this prepaid transportation card instead of going through the hassle of buying a one-way ticket or paying in cash. The technology inside these cards is continuously evolving, and as our Kwon So-hwa reports, so is its presence overseas.
More convenient, more compatible, more stylish, and more widely used. The Korea Smart Card Corporation's prepaid transportation card, known as the Tmoney card, was first introduced for subway and bus payments in the capital Seoul in 2004. This year, the card has been made compatible with nearly all forms of public transportation across the country. The most convenient part of the Tmoney card is its integration system. Whether you're traveling by subway, bus, or taxi, this one card can get you where you want to go. And not just in Korea. Other countries are scrambling to adopt the Tmoney system. Korea Smart Card CEO Choi Dae-sung told Arirang News that Tmoney America was established in New York last month. The company's first service abroad in Wellington, New Zealand, has been running since 2008.
When cards are held against the Tmoney card reader there, the settlement data is sent to Korea, and those results are transferred back to New Zealand. That's remote management service through cutting-edge technology.
And the so-called cashless bus ticketing system was introduced in Malaysia in 2010.
Southeast Asian countries have many concerns about their chaotic traffic conditions, and that's why they request consultations with our company, and we then participate in detailed mapping out of their systems.
Choi added that the service will expand even further by the end of this year and that the company does not want to limit its services to transportation. In Korea, the card is also used in daily micropayments at more than 50,000 places of business, such as convenience stores. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Bringing you the fresh updates from stories breaking in Korea and abroad. We give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul. Every weekday, only on Arirang.
Now, with the Asian Games set to kick off in Incheon in just over a week's time, some North Korean delegates are beginning to arrive. The first batch of 94 members will touch down at Incheon International Airport later this Thursday evening. The group will include North Korea's Olympic Committee chief Chang Soo-myung, as well as its football and rowing teams. The remainder of the athletes and coaches will continue to arrive throughout next week before the start of the event on September 19th. And many are wondering whether the upcoming Asian Games will soothe inter-Korean tensions, but another event garnering attention is a trip to the U.S. by South Korea's National Security Advisor. All eyes are on how his trip will pan out, especially with North Korea's foreign minister due in the U.S. in the coming days. Our Son Jung-in reports.
President Park's National Security Advisor Kim Kwan-jin will embark on a 3-day trip to the U.S. on Sunday in what will be his first trip to the country since he took up his new role in June. Sources say Kim is scheduled to meet his American counterpart Susan Rice and other security-related personnel to discuss a broad range of issues, including the Korea-U.S. alliance and the current diplomatic and security situation in Northeast Asia. In particular, the talks will likely center on Pyongyang's rapidly changing diplomatic stance following its decision to send its foreign minister Lee Soo-yong to a meeting of the UN General Assembly later this month. This will mark the first visit to the U.S. by a North Korean foreign minister in 15 years. During Kim's visit, the U.S. and South Korea will likely reaffirm their bilateral cooperation in dealing with the North's nuclear program and fine-tune details in strengthening security cooperation. Also, on military issues, attention is being drawn on how the talks will pan out regarding Washington's plan to deploy an advanced missile defense system called Terminal High Altitude Area Defense in South Korea. With the recent launch of a Unification Preparatory Committee and Seoul's proposal of high-level inter-Korean talks, Kim may also seek some advice regarding exchanges and cooperation measures during the anticipated talks. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, senior diplomats from Korea, China, and Japan are holding a trilateral meeting in Seoul on this Thursday for the first time in 10 months. Deputy Minister Lee Kyung-soo, China's Vice Foreign Minister Lee Jae-min, and Japan's Deputy Foreign Minister Shinsuke Sugiyama are discussing cooperative projects between the three nations, including those related to maritime affairs and cyber defense. Now, what's drawing the most attention to this one-day dialogue, though, are discussions on resuming an annual trilateral high-level talks, including a state summit that have been stalled for more than 2 years. This as last year's three-way summit was canceled due to strained relations over territorial and historical disputes in the region. And now shifting gears to some health news, dust is a constant nuisance in our lives, and it's also taking a toll on our health. Researchers in Korea say the dust on our beds could greatly increase the chances of lung-related illnesses, even more so than smoking. Our Connie Kim tells us more.
This woman has been living in her apartment for more than 10 years and cleans constantly over concerns of dust.
I tend to cough a lot in dusty places, so I change my bed sheets once every 2 or 3 weeks.
Her concerns are not unwarranted and may be helping to keep her free of lung diseases. New studies conducted by local universities show that the dust in our beds can have serious effects. According to study results, the ultra-fine particles found in beds can increase the risk of asthma up to 10 times. Continued exposure can also raise the risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease by up to 8 times. And while smokers have 3 times the risk of getting lung cancer compared to non-smokers, a dusty bedroom raises the risk by up to 40 times.
If there is a continuous exposure to bed dust, airways can be narrowed and destroyed, which can eventually cause lung cancer.
Experts say the best way to reduce the threat is to change your sheets regularly and keep your bedrooms well ventilated by opening the windows from time to time. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The Samgukyusa is a collection of Korea's oldest national legends, including the myth about the manpasikjeok, which is a fabled instrument of Korea. These stories are now being brought to life on the stage by the National Theatre Company of Korea. Our Im Yoon-hee takes us there.
Kil-gang has been playing the flute for years in the orchestra, but he isn't the crowd favorite. Out of the blue, people take a sudden interest in his instrument and ask him to play. But when the sound comes out, it's not what anyone expects. However, it does reveal one thing, that Kil-gang owns the manpasikjeok, a legendary flute that is believed to hold incredible powers. The legend of the manpasikjeok is found in the Samgukyusa, an ancient Korean text of stories and fables from Korea's history. And now its powers come alive in the hands of Kil-gang.
If you play the manpasikjeok, it's said that your enemies disappear. If there's a drought, it brings rainfall, and if your body is injured, it heals everything. But in the story, only the owner can harness the power of the pipe. It becomes a symbol of invincibility, and now there's a conflict between people of the past and present for control over the manpasikjeok.
1 minute, they're reporters with microphones. And the next, they're bearing swords. It's a subtle switch of weapons, but it's through these swaps and gestures that the actors travel through time. They must convince the audience of the changes between the 21st century and the Silla dynasty, so they make use of any and all props, including the dozens of instruments used to play live music, as well as create various sounds and effects. It's a stage where the senses are real and alive, a stage perfect for a play about a Korean legend.
The play is the base of anything on the stage, such as musicals and operas, so this play incorporates all aspects of performance. We use over 50 different instruments here, including everything from toys to traditional instruments, and even instruments from foreign countries. Through this performance, the audience can explore their imaginations and the actors can expand their emotions on the stage.
The manpasikjeok is said to calm 1,000 waves, created by the storms of life. Kil-gang holds the key to this power, and now he must be careful about where and when he plays his magical flute. Im Yoon-hee, Arirang News.
Good afternoon, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. We have clear sunny skies nationwide with temperatures ranging in the mid-20s to the low 30s. And as said, clouds are expected to move in from up north. Meanwhile, they will eventually blanket the entire whole nation, which will bring down the temperatures a bit. And also notice the big temperature differences between the days and nights. We're looking at a gap of about 10 degrees from the daytime highs and overnight lows, and the teens, into the teens rather. And so make sure you are prepared for all conditions. Now going over to our temperature readings. Seoul will peak at 30 degrees this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will top out at 29 and 27 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island is in the 26s, while Dokdo reaches 24, while Mankungang stays in the mid-20s as well. Now that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Michelle. That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. Our next newscast is at 6 p.m. Korea time. I'll see you then.